Before we start, a quick heads up. What you're about to watch is a tutorial I made back in 2018. It was exclusive to my premium members, so chances are you've never seen it before. Now, 6 years later, I went back and remade the whole thing from scratch with a few changes, and I even integrated some AI stuff just to see how it looks. The remake isn't on the channel yet, I'm recording it, but you can see a preview on the screen now. One thing I can tell you is that it will be way shorter than this one, so keep an eye out for it. By the way, you can get the PSD file and the stock images of this tutorial for free, link in the description. Alright, let's get into it. So for this tutorial I used as a canvas size, I used the size of the background. So let's open our stock folder. This is the stock folder, and in here you'll find all the images that you need for this. And I started with this image. I got it from unsplash.com, like most of the images that I used. You can see it's really huge. I used 6000 by 4000, but for this tutorial I'm going to make it a little smaller. I'm going to use 3000 pixels for the width, and I'm going to activate lock the proportions here, and I'm going to click OK. So this is going to be the size that I'm going to use for this tutorial. Now the first thing I want to do is fix this part over here. You can do it really quick with a clone stamp, or let's do it with the clone stamp, it's a lot easier. I'm going to do it really quick, so don't expect I'm going to make the perfect selections here. You can take your time and do it a lot better and clean the image around here if you want to, but I'm just going to show you what I did. I'm not going to do it perfectly for the tutorial. So as I said, on this tutorial I'm going to focus more on how to create this background. You can see it's pretty different, and it has, I'm going to show you how to get that dark tone and that bluish color. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the adjustment. So it's not going to be like the previous tutorials where what I did was combining all the stock images and then make the adjustments. In this case, what I'm going to do is make the adjustments step by step as I add the images. So, and focusing more on the background. So I'm going to start with the hue saturation for this. I'm going to add a hue saturation, and I'm going to drop the saturation to -23, and then I'm going to change the hue as well to -19, and this gives me this more of a dry effect and unsaturated effect. And next I'm going to add that part over here. I wanted to have that light here. This would help separate the model from the background and create more depth on the image. So searching on unsplash.com, I found this other image. You can use others on unsplash.com, you'll find lots of them. And I found this one, which I thought it works really well. So I'm going to paste it on top. And of course, I'll have to make it smaller. About that big, I think. I'm going to leave it just a little bigger, just in case I want to make it smaller after that. Let me check the original so I can see more or less where that falls in here. Anyways, after I'm gonna create the layer mask, and after we do that, we can make changes. So create a layer mask and get the gradient tool. Make sure you have black to white, and I'm gonna create the linear gradient. I'm gonna start from here and right there, but I'm gonna reverse this. And you can see it fits almost perfectly. I really like that. When I found it, I didn't think that it would work that well, but you can see actually it's really natural, the transition here, which is really nice. Not always you find images that blend that well and that easy for manipulation, but in this case it does. So let's name this forest. And this one, which I'm going to merge with the background, remember this is the fixed part here on the bottom. I'm going to merge both images. I'm going to name this, actually I'm going to leave it to background. And now I have to make some adjustments to the forest. I'm going to add a levels adjustment. You can see that it has really, it actually has no contrast. You can see that this shadow here is really washed out. and I don't like that. So I created the levels adjustment. I'm gonna clip it with Alt and click on the between the two layers. And as I said, this is an intermediate, or for some user maybe a little advanced tutorial, so I'm gonna skip parts explaining how to clip layers and stuff like that. PSD Box Premium is for advanced users and intermediate user, not for beginners. That's why I'm gonna skip some parts. But anyways, you can see here on the histogram, you can tell that there's actually no contrast on the image almost. So I'm gonna give you the values that I have for this. So 26 for the shadows, and the shadows are this here on the right side, on the left side. 26, this increases, well, darkens the shadows. 1 for the midtones, I didn't touch the midtones, and 225 for the highlights. And this is how it looks like. I think it looks better than this. Now it integrates a lot better with the contrast of this image. So basically what you want to do is match the contrast of this image of the forest with the foreground. In this case, the background layer. Next, I'm going to add a solid color. And with the solid color, what I'm doing is just create a base color, a starting color. I'm gonna use a solid color because this affects the whole image, and I can start going towards the color that I need. So I'm gonna use a bluish tone, and I'm gonna give it a color code. The color code is 536E80. This really, well, not very saturated blue. And I'm gonna set the blend mode to overlay. And you can see that already I start to get a darker tone. With the overlay, you increase the contrast even more. And you also start to, well, you can see it has this bluish tint. You can use other adjustments, like for example, a color lookup or a gradient map if you want. But I found that the color fill, it's easier, just add a color and change the blend mode, and that's it. Next, I'm gonna add a color lookup. So here, if you don't have Photoshop CS6 at least, you'll have to use something else. So let me see, I use the horror blue. Let's type horror blue. This one over here comes with Photoshop. You can see I have a huge list of presets, but this one comes with Photoshop by default. So if you don't have Photoshop CS6 at least, just use a solid color and change to overlay and try to get this tone. So try to go from this to this using other adjustments. With a solid color, you should be able to get something close to this. And I'm gonna use the normal blend mode, and I'm gonna drop the opacity to 20%. So just darken things a little more and increase the contrast just a little more. Next I'm gonna add a levels adjustment. Not curves. You could use curves, but in some cases I like to use levels. I think I have a free tutorial on my YouTube channel about how to when I use levels and when I use curves. And here I'm gonna give it a value. So for the shadows we have 4, 1.04 for the midtones, and for the highlights 227. You can see this adds some light back on the image. Why is that? Well, I wanted to have more light, especially over here, so I could use a layer mask and just delete the effect on some other areas, but I left it like that because it just adds a slightly more contrast and just a little more light. I didn't want to have a very dark scene, and especially here on this path, I think it looks better if it's brighter. And then I darkened the sides. Just create a new layer and name it darkness, and just grab the brush tool with the B key, and I'm gonna use a soft brush, and in my case I'm gonna activate the pen pressure for my, well, actually the transfer, yeah, I'm gonna choose pen pressure. The transfer affects the opacity of the brush, and I want to control the opacity with the pen pressure. Basically, how hard I press on the pen determines how much opacity the brush should have. So I'm gonna increase the brush size, and I'm also, even though my pen has 2048 pressure levels, I like to control the opacity even more. So I'm gonna drop the opacity a little more to about 65 or or 50%. And just with black, just start painting around here and carefully start building up the effect. I want to have especially the top left and right sides a little darker. As you can see here on the original, they are pretty dark. And just paint like that. Change the brush size where you need to. And especially right over there. Paint with black and darken some parts of the image. As I said, especially the top part. Don't worry if we have, if we darken a little this area here, we're gonna use light effects later when we create the light effects, and we're gonna add more light back on the image. You don't want to have this completely black. Notice that you can still see the silhouettes of the branches here, so we need that. So don't do something like this. You don't want to have that. Just darken stuff a little. You go from this to this, but just make sure you see some parts of the silhouettes of those branches over there. Well, we're done with the darkness. Next, we're gonna start add things on our image, and the first thing I'm gonna add is the model, because this will determine where I put the rest of the elements. So on the stock folder, you will find this image. I got it from deviantart.com. You can see the name of the author. I'm gonna include a text file with the link to this image, and also with the link of another image, because this is from a photo shoot, and you'll find different images. If you want to use another image, you can get another one, and it's really high resolution. It's really nice. You can also see that I included its layer mask. So I'm not gonna spend time here extracting this from the background, even though it's really easy, because you can see the background is out of focus, so you can use the quick selection tool or other tools. But anyways, I'm gonna open both of them. You already have a layer mask, which is great, so you don't have to spend time doing that. So what do you do with this layer? It's a JPEG file. You just select everything with Control A, Control C to copy it, go back to this image and unlock it with Alt double click, and now create a layer mask. And now you have to, the problem here is that this image is not cropped, but anyways, what you have to do, I'm gonna show you that, is activate this layer mask on full screen. Alt click and paste the image over there. Now here you can see on the navigator that it's actually not in the right place, which is not good. I saved the layer mask when the model was actually cropped, the image of the model was cropped. But anyways, I'm going to show you how to fix this. Now, to exit this full screen layer mask, you have to shift click this, and alt click again, sorry. And in order to match this, what you can do is unlock this layer mask and its layer, and with the arrow keys you can move this around until you fit this perfectly over there. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna now lock this again, and now you can safely erase this with the layer mask selected. You can, or actually you can even crop the image, because it's gonna save some space on your document. It's gonna make your document a little smaller. Press enter and we're done. Now I'm gonna move this whole layer with its layer mask. Make sure it's locked. Use the move tool and just click here on the canvas and drag it to your other tab and let go. And you can see it brings it to this document with the layer mask. And now I'm gonna convert this into a smart object. Right click and choose convert to smart object, because now I'm gonna make it smaller. But I still wanna have the original quality, the original size of it, just in case. And I'm gonna put her over here for now. Since I don't know the size of this, I'm gonna go back to here and just check more or less how big she was on the original. You have to keep in mind the perspective. If you put her right over here, she will seem really small. So just use something reasonable. I think I'm gonna leave her right over there, like so. And here you'll find this plants over here. And what you have to do here is just use a layer mask. Let's name this model. and create a layer mask for her. And what you should do here is carefully start masking these plants. Just drop the opacity of the model, get the brush tool, and use a hard brush in this case, a little smaller. And I'm gonna deactivate my pen pressure for the transfer, and carefully mask the dress where you see those plants over here. I'm not gonna do it here, I'm just gonna show you how I did it. But basically just remove the dress, mask the dress where you see the leaves of these plants, like this, also right over here. This will create a sense of depth on your image, and it's going to create more of a 3D looking image, like that. And I think that's it. I'm gonna show you the, see that? You can see that how it looks with and without the layer mask. I'm gonna show you the original so you can see it a little better. You can see what I did here, carefully painting these plants out. Let me see if I can find, I think I put this inside a group. Oh, you can see without the layer mask and with the layer mask. So just remove part of the plants where the dress overlaps them. Okay, let's close the layer mask and let's close the original image here. Now we have the model in place. The next thing we're going to do is start adding the wolves around here. Now on the stock folder you'll find all the images of the wolves that I got. Most of them are from depositphotos.com. I use that stock site a lot because it's cheap. So you can just remove them from the background using the quick selection tool. Is really easy. They're gonna be really small on the image, so you don't have to make perfect edges. I'm gonna bring them from this document. You can say I have 3 or 4 of them, and I'm just gonna bring them from here to my other document. So these are the wolves that I have here. So basically just crop them, and I have to make them a little smaller. You can see that all of them have some smart objects in them. I'm gonna delete them so you can see the original image. So just make them smaller and place them on your image. I'm gonna put this one over here, and actually you have to put them beneath the model layer. So I'm gonna do that in just a second. I'm gonna put that one there, and this one, since it's a little closer to her, I'm gonna put him right over there. Like that. I can even put it right there because this part is it's cut, so I can mask it and darken that side so it's not visible. Okay, so these are my wolves over here, and you can notice that I created a layer mask for each of them. These layer masks are for their feet. You can see they're standing on the grass. So what you should do is get the brush tool and locate this grass brush, which in Photoshop CC 2018 I really don't like how they made the brushes palette. I don't like it at all. With these folders over here, you just add brushes. I don't know how to work with it, so the original brushes are gone. I had to get them from CS6. I really don't like how it works, but anyways, I got these brushes here. Get these grass brushes if you can. I'm gonna try to include them in the download so you have them, and just get this grass brush, actually this one, and by default it's gonna activate the color dynamics, which you don't need, so make sure you deactivate that. Get the foreground white color, and let me see if I can see the brush size, like that, and just paint with, let's see if I'm over here, select the layer mask and just mask like this. Okay, for that one, let's work on this one now, on this layer mask. Just mask like that, and then this one as well. Oops, that was not good. For this one you can even use a soft brush, and that's it. Okay, after you mask that, you have to make them darker, and for that I used you can see I put them inside a group, and then I created a new layer and I clipped that layer to the whole group. If you cannot do this, if you cannot create this as a clipped layer to a group, what you can do is select the 3 layers, right click and choose convert to smart object, and then you can create a new layer and clip that layer to the smart object. And I'm gonna name this body shadows. I'm gonna go a bit quick here because there's a lot of details here to take care of, and I don't want to make this video too long. You can check the original here so you can see how I did this. You can see it's not perfect. I don't like the lack of contrast that I got on them, so maybe you can make it a little better than I did. Basically on this body shadows, what you have to do is just use a soft brush. Let's maybe use this one. Paint with black, but I need to activate my transfer option and drop the opacity in the transfer option. It was not activated. Pen pressure, and I'm gonna lower the spacing. So just paint the darkened part of their bodies, especially the bottom part, and well, the part that is facing the darkness, the dark part of the forest there. This one as well. That light is okay because he's got some light coming from over there from the background. And this one maybe is gonna be the toughest one because it's almost white, and painting with black over white, it's gonna remove the contrast, as you can see over here. But anyways, I'm gonna leave it like that, and now I'm gonna add some curves or levels. Let's add some levels, also clipped to the group, and I'm gonna increase a little the contrast and the midtones like so. Now, if you see that this global levels is not working well for all of them, you'll have to go inside of each one of them and create levels for each of these layers, because each one has its own lightness and shadows. Another thing we can do is add layer styles. In my case, I can add layer styles to the whole group. So I can double click on the group and add styles like I would do on a normal layer. If you cannot do this, again, you have to select the layers of the wolves and convert them into a smart object, and then apply the layer styles to the smart object. I'm gonna add a color overlay, and I'm gonna actually sample a color from here and just use this bluish tone. And just try blend modes. You can use multiply if you want. This will darken things. Color burn will not really work that well. Soft light will not work well either, because you can see this one is really bright, so it's not gonna really work that well. Maybe multiply is the one that's gonna work the best. Try others. This one seems to work really nice, but the contrast is too high. So this was a pretty time-consuming part. I thought it's gonna be easier, but it was not. So just take your time and patiently, or just find images of darker walls. But seems to me that multiply is the one that works the best. I'm gonna drop the opacity a little bit and go back to the levels, and just actually those highlights should not be touched. Just move the midtones and the shadows, and that's it. Now they are too dark, so I'm gonna go back here to the layer styles and drop the opacity on the multiply. You can even add more than one color overlay. If you have Photoshop CC, you can add more of them. With one of them, you can add color, for example. So you can color them, and with the other one, just darken them a little bit. Like so, using an unsaturated color like that, and create something like this. You can even create light effects. This one really looks awful. So for this one, I would create a levels adjustment for himself alone. This one, create the levels, clip it so that I don't affect curves, sorry. And I would just increase the highlights and create more contrast, because it was looking too flat for my taste. Okay, these are the wolves. For the eyes, to make them stand out, at the end you can create a new layer, on color dodge, and just paint some light there on their eyes. But anyways, let's leave them there and move on and start creating more effects. I created those evil eyes there around the forest, like so. I'm gonna show you how to do that. It's really fun. But first, let's create the shadow for the model, and then we also have to create some effects for her. Let's start with the shadow. Actually, let's group her in, put her inside a group, which I'm gonna name model. And below her, I'm gonna create a new layer, and I'm gonna name it model shadow. And here you can use the original as reference. Just open the smart object and disable the layer mask for a second, and you can see how the shadow was looking. And actually I'm gonna leave that there so I can switch back and forth. And here on the model layer, I'm gonna get a brush tool. And opacity 50 is okay for me. If you don't have a graphics tablet and a pen, you can set the opacity to 50 and the flow to 20 or 30%. And in my case, I'm going to activate transfer and just try to mimic that shadow that I see here. The light comes, well, here the light was uniform, so it was a soft light. But anyways, I'm going to create a hard shadow over here, a really dark shadow behind. I'm gonna fade it out as I come back towards her feet. Well, actually, as I come forward. And the same here. Obviously, here the light, this shadow should not touch this plant. So you should use this layer mask. Then after you're done painting, use the selection of the layer mask and with an eraser erase the shadow, which is over the plants. Let's move on and paint this. On the original image that I created, the shadow is a little more realistic because I spent a little more time working on it, of course. I don't remember how much time I spent working on this manipulation, but I think about 3 or 4 hours, or maybe 5, if you include also this research of the stock images. Maybe searching for the stock images is the most time-consuming part for me, finding images that fit together. So I'm gonna leave the shadow there. You can see how it looks here on the original. I spent a little more time and things look maybe a little better. So we're done with that shadow on the ground, but we also have to darken herself, the dress itself. So I'm gonna create a new layer on top of her and I'm gonna clip it. Alt click, and I'm gonna name it body shadow. And here we have to paint some light, some shadow as well. But before we do that, actually we have to create some adjustments, and after we create with the adjustments and darken the whole thing, we can paint the shadow. So select the layer and create a selective color, and this will create it, in my case, automatically as a clipped mask because I already have one clipped. But if not, just click this selective color. And I just changed the reds and the whites. So I set the reds to 74, -1, 0, and 39. Basically, I add more black on the reds. This will darken the reds. Next, on the whites, sorry, I have 26, -6, -8 for the yellows, and for the black, 57. I darkened this part. I just wanted to change the dress a little, and I gave it this cyan look, even more bluish if you remove more yellow if you want. And you can see it darkens the whole thing with just this adjustment. Next, I created the hue saturation because what I didn't like is the saturation of these reds. They're too bright. Given that she's on a dark background, this color should be a little more desaturated. So what I did is I switched to the reds, or you can simply use this and click on the red and it's going to select the reds for you automatically, or from the drop down select reds and change the hue to -7 first, then the saturation to -30 and the lightness to -16, and you get this. Okay, this is how it looks like. If you don't like the tone, just leave this to 0 in my case. I don't know why it looks, it didn't look like on the original, but anyway, just drop the saturation a little. Okay, we're done with this now. Let's now create that shadow. I already have the layer here. So what I'm gonna do is get the brush tool, opacity and flow, I'm going to leave it like that for my case because I have the pen and the graphics tablet. And just create here on the bottom, you have to create a really dark shadow because, well, the ground is dark, so this one has to be dark as well. And then we're gonna fade the effect as we go towards the top, like that. But the very bottom should be black, should be really dark. And then just fade the effect as you go up. This part over here as well. Carefully, don't paint over her leg. Okay, like maybe if you do it more carefully, you should get a better result. In my case, I think it's a little too dark, so I'm gonna drop the opacity just a little bit. Okay, but I think it looks better than without the shadow. Of course, you can go ahead and paint the eyes of the girl and just make some retouching, but it's not the purpose of this tutorial, so I'm gonna skip that. In my case, I did some touch-ups at the end, but for now I'm gonna leave it like that. Then I added more stuff around here. You can see I added more details. I added this little rabbit and this basket over here. I'm not gonna add them here on the tutorial because it's really easy. Just open the stock folder. For example, for the basket, just open that and go to, I don't know, maybe to have different selection methods. Maybe with color range, you could click here on the whites and just create the selection, create the layer mask, inverted of course, then remove this part over here with a solid brush, like this. I'm doing it really quick, so I'm gonna apply this and crop it and put it maybe here on top of everything. Make it smaller. Maybe you can put it even on her, well, make her like she's holding it like that. But I'm putting here just for reference so I can see more or less how big this basket should be, like that. And what I did is I just put it here on the ground. Maybe I flipped it horizontally and then just creating something like that. And the process is the same. Just group it so you know that this group belongs to the basket, and create some shadows on a new layer underneath with a soft brush, of course. Let's create some shadows over there. And then, just like I did with the model, create a new layer. Like this would be the body shadows if you want. And just create some shadows on the bottom part. That's really awful, but anyways. And then on the whole group, you can remember that everything should fit the background. That's why I edited first the background, and then I fitted all the elements on the background. So you should match both the contrast and the color. So you could do this, for example, with the color overlay, just like we did with the rest of the elements. With color or other blend modes, you can do this. You can use levels or curves and just try to get the integrate this the best you can on the background, and then add the apples. And you can see here I spent more time basically, and I got these results. And the same with the rabbit. Just add the rabbit, create the shadows underneath. Here on the PSD file, you can see everything is, well, it's grouped and everything has its own layers and effects and the shadows and everything. So you can see how I made that. Let's see how you can create this evil eyes here in the background. It's really fun doing that. What I did, let me go back to my document and close this. What I did is I created a new layer with some layer styles. Let's create this new layer and let's name it evil. And what I did first is I got the brush tool and I used hardness 100%, and then I used a really small brush, 1 or 2 pixels. Actually I have to do it with the mouse, and instead of using the brush I used the pencil, I think, I'm not sure. And let's use something a little bigger. Yeah, and I'm gonna use the red color. Let's see if I can do it with the brush. Even if it's the strength is to 100%, it's not gonna look nice. So you have to be careful. Well, actually, this one will look okay. A little smaller, a little bigger. So basically, what I did is I created 2 points like that, and then I converted this into a brush because I don't want to paint this manually all every time I want to create some eyes. So what I did is I created something like this. I'm gonna deactivate the rest of the layers, pressing Alt and clicking this eye icon. Everything else will go away. And once I have the correct size for my brush, I'm gonna delete this. I'm gonna paint it with black. So I'm gonna create 2 points here with the brush tool. Paint 1 and 2 over there. And maybe even click twice. Like that. And I'm gonna convert this into a brush. I'm gonna select this. And with everything else hidden, you can see there's nothing visible here. I will go to edit. I'm gonna make the selection because this image is really big, and if you don't select, if you go to edit, you can see that define custom brush. Well, actually, in this case it's selected, but in some cases, if your image is really big, if it's 5,000 or 6,000 pixels, maybe this will be deactivated because the maximum size of a brush, I think it's 5,000 pixels. Make the selection and go to edit, define brush preset. And I'm gonna name this evil eyes. If you cannot do it this way, just create a new document, 500 pixels by 500 or something like that. And first, to re-enable the rest of the layers, Alt and click on the eye layer, on the eye icon, sorry. And if you cannot do this like that, first make sure you get the correct brush size. Paint a couple of eyes on your canvas because the size that I have here, 20 pixels, might not be right for you. Maybe it's too big or maybe it's too small, depending on your canvas size. So get the correct brush size and then create a new document, a smaller document, so you can create the brush and make the eyes that way. Once you have the brush, you can see it's here. Once you have that, what you have to do is start painting some eyes around here. Let me get the pen back. And I'm gonna start painting eyes. You just click one there, one. Oops, but before we do that, we'll just make some variation. Let's open the brush settings. You can do this with F5, I think, or here from window, choose brush settings. Yes, F5. And basically, you can do it with a single stroke or just painting. If you wanna do it with a single stroke, just increase the spacing quite a lot. Then what else? On the shape dynamics, we could change the angle. So you can see each set of 2 eyes just changes the angle. I'm not gonna change the roundness, but I will change the scattering. I'm gonna scatter them quite a lot on both axes. Count, I'm gonna leave it to 1, and I can paint it like that, but I really don't like that much. I'm gonna, well, actually here on the brush tip shape, I'm gonna increase the spacing even more. It's better to just paint manually here and there, but for that, let's deactivate the spacing because we're gonna have more precision, and I'm gonna deactivate scattering. Okay, and just zoom in on your image and start adding evil eyes around here like that. Oops, just a few ones, don't abuse that, especially on the dark parts of the image. It makes no sense to paint one over there, so just where you have darkness on your image, for example right there, and one over there, like they're hidden, I don't know, animals or something like that. Once you have them here on this evil layer, we have to create some layer styles. And I'm gonna give you the styles that I have, if I can find this on my notes over here. I wanted to save this as a style effect, but I'm gonna give you the values that I have. So open the layer styles, and we're gonna start with the drop shadow. Actually, this one's gonna be light, but anyways, I'm gonna give you the color that I have. The color is F72B21. Click OK. Here, the opacity 100%, angle 90 degrees. Make sure you uncheck use global light, angle 90 degrees, distance 0, spread 9, and size 16. So this is our drop, our blend mode normal, sorry. You can see this creates some light around them. Next, inner shadow. Where it's inner shadow, right over here. Color, I'm going to choose white. Color dodge for the blend mode, so use color dodge. Angle 89 degrees. 89, not really that important, but anyways. Distance 0, choke 22, and size 2. But actually, if you just use red, the color dodge here is not really that necessary, because actually it's not gonna do much in this case. Then a color overlay. That's why I used inner shadow, because I think I painted it with painted that with white. I'm gonna give it a style that I have, BF19 1D. BF19 1D. So I'll use this red color, opacity 100%, and blend mode set to normal. And you can see the reason why they are white is because of that inner shadow. So if you just paint them with red, you don't have to add color overlay and inner shadow either. So let's add outer glow. This is important. I'm gonna choose linear light for the blend mode. Linear light, opacity 10% only. The color that I use is BA5C2D. So here, add the color code over here, BA5C2D. Click OK. And then I used size 3, and the range I have it to 46%. And here on the contour I have it to Gaussian, this one over here. And I'm gonna increase the opacity a lot more. This makes the eyes a little bigger, okay? And click OK. And that's how I created this evil eyes, as simple as that. Here are a bit too big. On this other canvas that I have here, they're a little smaller, which is nice. They're cute, and I like how they look like. Okay, so we're pretty much done with the elements of the manipulation itself. Let's start making some adjustments. First, I'm gonna create a new layer, which I'm gonna name Brighten Lights, and I'm gonna put it on color dodge. And I will get the brush tool, and this time I'm gonna use a soft brush, a normal brush, soft, and make sure I don't have the pen pressure on. And I'm gonna paint, especially here on the forest. And I want to enhance the lights of the forest. And if you want, you can even drag this light under the model, because I don't want to affect the model, just brighten the light. So I'm gonna maybe drop it under the model over there on top of the darkness. And let's see what I can. Oops, this color is too bright. I forgot to change the color. Since I want to have a bluish tone, I'm gonna use a blue tint for my tone, and really dark. The color dodge is really sensitive, so make sure you use a really dark tone. Like you can see here, it's even that way was too bright. So I'm gonna try with this one. Yeah, this one works a little better. And just add I want it more saturated. I'm gonna undo. I want it more saturated and darker. Yeah, that looks a lot better. And just brighten parts of the image. See that? Next, I'm gonna create a new layer. Now I will create this one on top, and I'm gonna name it Glows. And I'm gonna put this on screen. And here we have to use, let me check if I have the pen pressure on. And here we have to use, again, really dark tones. Actually, this one works well, as I see. You can get the color code this one if you want. And just paint some lights around there where you want to have some glows of light. If it's too strong, just drop this a little and make it darker, and make some glows around there as well. For the wolf here, I want to have something a little brighter, like that maybe. Let's see how that works. Yeah. Okay, and I forgot to create some mist around here. I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna create it on, well, actually on top of this brighten lights layer, and on top of the darkness behind the model and behind the wolves. Create a new layer, and I'm gonna use the gradient tool. Select the gradient tool and use foreground to transparent. But before we do that, we have to change the color, something like this. I think I'm gonna use. Let's see if that works. If it doesn't work, we're gonna make it darker. And we have to use reflected. So this preset over here, this type of gradient, and this layer should be set on screen. And now I'm gonna create a gradient on this, well, at this part of the image. I'm gonna click here, press and hold the shift key so I can create a straight line, and drag up like this. And I have to invert here. Click reverse if it comes out like this, undo, and do it again. You wanna create something like this. Okay, now it doesn't look right because of the wolves. So I have to drag the wolves group with all its layers. I have to drag it behind, well, under the model. So I'm gonna do it now. And this layer, which will be my mist layer, I'm gonna put it on top. So the mist layer should be below the model and on top of the wolves. And I'm gonna do this again. Now it's gonna look a lot better. Create a gradient like that, create a layer mask, and now with the brush, this layer mask, paint with black to remove the effect on some parts of the image, especially here on the sides where we have that darkness. We don't need that. We just need this here on, especially on the center, okay? And just have that mist over there. I think it looks nice. And I like how it looks like. Okay, we're done with the manipulation. What we have left to do now is just make some more adjustments. Here you can add the dodge and burn. You can create a new layer, set it on overlay, and fill it with 50% gray. Go to edit, fill, and choose 50% gray, and click OK. And here with white, with a really low opacity and flow, maybe 20 and 10, you could make her eyes stand out a little more if you want. Painting with white, okay, on this layer, filled with 50% gray. Let's deactivate transfer. So just a few passes. I'm going to increase the opacity to 50. Okay, I'm going to do it really quick. You can see how that looks like. The eyes of the wolves, or you can, as I said, you can create a new layer and put it on color dodge. And for the eyes, you could use even a red color if you want to have evil eyes, and just paint like that to increase the flow and the opacity. And you can see how that way the eyes stand out a little more. Obviously, I'm doing this really quick, but anyways, and for the model, you could use a neutral color, for example, something like this. Ooh, that looks really awful. Don't do that. It's better not to do anything if you're not sure what you're doing. With a dodge and burn, you can create, well, the eyes and stuff like that. I have free tutorials showing you how to use the dodge and burn, but anyways. Next, I'm going to add a color lookup, another one. And this time I'm going to use the crisp winter from the first drop down. Crisp winter is right over here. And this we're going to give more blue tone to my image. I'm going to leave the blend mode to normal and set the opacity to 25%. And now I'm going to use levels. And I'm going to give it values 6 for the shadows, for midtone 0.95, and highlights 251. If this does not work for you, just drop the opacity if it's too strong, like in my case, and you're done. And last but not least, camera raw. I really like to use camera raw at the end, so I'm gonna create a stamp, and you can do that with Shift Alt Command E or Shift Alt Control E on a Mac. In my computer it says Alt. I hear people saying Option, but in my computer it says Alt at the next to the Command key. It's called Alt. I don't know why people call it Option, but anyways. So create a stamp. You can also select all, edit, go to edit, copy, merge, and then edit, paste. Basically just merge all layers onto a new one, and I'm going to convert this into a smart object. And now I can use the camera raw filter. If you don't see it here, it's because you don't have Photoshop CC, but you can still do this. All you need to do is just go to File, Save As, let's see what that is, Save As, and here choose TIFF as the format, as the file format, because TIFF is a kind of raw file. So from the format here, choose TIFF and save it, and then open that TIFF file back in Photoshop, and by default it should open it here in camera raw. And I created a preset here. Just click here, choose load settings, or just locate the preset menu around here, depending on your Photoshop version. And here just look at forest final. You can see the wolves curves is here. I forgot to use that. I have a preset for the wolves. These are the curves that I use for the wolves. But on camera raw, use this preset called forest final. This is the preset that I saved on the original, and this will do all the adjustments for you. Obviously you can change this and tweak them to your own liking. Don't forget about gradients. For example, you can use a radial gradient. Let's reset, and for example increase the exposure or the clarity to have more clarity on the woman. So basically focus the attention here. I don't know, maybe here on the background you could create, or you can create another one for the wolf, and I don't know, maybe here you can create more clarity, creating a gradient like this. Let's reset this and increase the clarity a little, and I don't know, maybe the shadows if you want to have more light and things like that. And I don't know, here with the split toning you can add more, maybe yellow on the highlights if you want to have that, but in my case I don't want to. More vignetting effect, if it's too strong just tweak this and things like that. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to show the before camera raw and after. And this is how I created this manipulation. We're done. It's not really a difficult manipulation, but it has a lot of details, especially here on the wolves. If they're not looking good, my advice is not, just add one. This one here, it's the easiest one, and just take care of details. And the lighting here is not really that good, so if you don't like how they look like, just don't add them. It's better to have a more minimal manipulation, to call it that way, and look good than have lots of elements that don't fit on your image. So that's all for today. If you have any questions about this tutorial or the technique, or if you have any problems creating this or downloading any files, or if something is missing, just post a comment or send me an email, and I'll be glad to help you. So I hope you will join me on the next tutorial. For now, this is all that I wanted to show you. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.